I ran to get this dresser set when I saw it listed for only $150. You can see it has had much better days and will require a lot of repair, but I had a hunch that it was by Dixie Furniture, and when I went to pick up, that hunch was proved correct, and these pieces are really valuable, so I was pretty excited to get them. My hope is to save these tops that are obviously very beat up, and then if I can do that, to then restain the rest of it. So let's get going. So I'm using Green Easy Stripper. It's like become my favorite because it is way cleaner stripper to use. It works great. I just have a cheap chip brush that I keep and reuse every time. So I'm just pouring it out. I'm going to spread it out, and for the sides I can pour it into here and then just brush it on. And then I don't feel like I need to wear a respirator with this. I probably will sometimes, but especially when I'm filming right now and speaking, I'm not. But I'm really sensitive to smells, and it doesn't bother me. So and just how well it works, I can't praise it enough. So I have been converted. Another backup one I use is Clean Strip, the premium stripper. It's still kind of expensive too, but it stinks. That stuff's pretty toxic. So I can't 100% confirm this. I think this might be soy based, or I know they have some soy based stains. I've not tried their stains yet, but I might put that on the list to try. But you do want to make sure as you're applying this that you apply it pretty generously. That way it doesn't dry out and it's going to get down into all the nooks and crannies and really get all that finish off, so you have less sanding to do. Although I guess there's not really nooks and crannies here. Not too deep of anything going on, just the scratches. So it's been about an hour 15. I've found that that's plenty long enough, so I'm going to go ahead and start scraping it off. And I've got like a 5-in-1 paint scraper, works really great. And then you come in with the finishing spray and steel wool to rub it down afterward. After I got that first blush stripping done, I am sanding the top. You can see even on the base of the dresser that there's quite a bit of stain left. This stain was pretty stubborn, but it still sanded off pretty well. I used a 120 grit, and you can see there's not a lot of stain left, but there are quite a few scratches and water rings left that I'm going to have to address. Alright, so even after sanding, there's still these water spots remaining, and if I can't get these out, then I'm not going to be able to stain the whole dresser, and I don't want to go through all the detailed sanding if I don't have to. So I saw with the furniture doctor, Lily, that she'd use Barkeeper's Friend, so I'm going to try that. I'm just going to wet it, and then this on there. I grab my little scrub brushes. I gotta go grab those. So mainly what I'm trying to do here is create a paste. The Barkeeper's Friend has oxalic acid in it, which works as a bleach. And so I'm putting it on there, mixing it with water, and then scrubbing it on there. You could also use a steel wool pad, but I just used this brush and scrubbed it on there and then rinsed it off. All right, so now I'm just wiping it off, and I'll rinse it too with some more of this water and see what it looks like after it dries. But even after sanding, I still have a couple of scratches here that are not coming out. So I'm going to use the method of an iron and put steam into that. And what's happened, because when there's a scratch, it's compressed the wood fibers down, and the steam will give it moisture and help bring it up. So I've already dampened this cloth a little bit. Just gonna put it on there. And you can come through and carefully sand it. You be careful because it's wet. All right, I'm gonna let that dry and just see how it looks here in a little while. And then I just make my way around the dresser and take care of the other scratches I see. And then once that's finally done, I'm going back over it with a 120 grit to hopefully even out the entire surface and get everything the same consistency on top. Okay, I just want to show you up close these areas where I was working on the water spots, and then the scratches. There are a couple little dots here and there that were left from, I think, from the Barkeeper's Friend, but it's really minor, and I think it'll blend okay in with everything. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so as you can see here, I have a missing drawer glide bottom, and thankfully these are the same. And so I'm just going to be measuring to duplicate this. I'm going to use my miter saw to cut it to length, and then I'll use my table saw to get it to the depth I need, and then also to make this groove kind of act like a dado. I think that's terminology. I haven't done woodworking in a while, like this terminology wise, but you can just pass it through over the saw if you don't have a router that you could use. I do have a router, I've not used it before, and I just don't feel like figuring out that learning curve, but I've created these dados before by just passing it over the saw at a certain depth, several passes, but you'll see me do that. So I'm gonna get to work with measuring and get a cut. I do want to note that this probably was not a good idea. It's a pretty thin cut, and just the chances of the board getting pinched and thrown back are pretty high. I was standing to the side for the chance of any kickback, but I don't know, watching this footage, I'm going to do something different next time. But now I am working on that dado groove, so I am just passing it over the blade. The blade is only at the height that I need it to be cut out, and then for each pass, after each pass, I am just tapping the fence over just a little bit so I cut it a little bit more each time. All right, so the drawer glide goes inset a little bit here, so I'm gonna have to basically do another dado to kind of create a little right angle so that'll fit in there. But basically all I'm gonna do is see how much it overhangs here, and then I'm gonna make a little mark, and I'm gonna know that I just need to make a notch this far in, and then it'd probably be to around there, but I'll measure that to get how much clearance of a right angle should be there. All right, so I will set my blade height to here, and then I'll make just a few passes to get this chunk out so it'll be able to fit in there. So an important note here, I have since learned that you should use a cross-cutting sled for a cut like this. I thought that since I was just taking a little bit off and it was riding against the fence that I'd be okay, but when you're cutting across the grain, there is a higher likelihood of kickback, so a simple cross-cutting sled is what I should use next time. All right, so I ended up making a little groove on this back side for this wood. I think I'm gonna have to do it a little bit more, but it fits in there perfectly, so I'm pretty excited that that worked out so well. I did run this over the glide too, just to make sure it fit well, and it does. So I'm gonna fix this a little bit, and should hopefully be good to go for a dry run. Okay, so I have that in there, and I'm going to do a dry run with it before I glue it in. All right, pretty awesome. All right, so I'm just going to go in with some wood glue, squirt some in here really well. And then along the bottom. All right. And then I'm just going to flip it over. Actually, probably going to clamp here, and then I'll put weights on the other side. All right, got my clamp. Put that in there. And then I'm gonna flip and add my weights so the bottom of the drawer will press down into the piece of wood. So we'll see how that goes. All right, I remove the clamp weights. See how she does. On there. There we go. Yay! After getting all that done, I dove into the detail sanding, and It was a lot. Like, this footage is not going to cover the hours and hours that I spent trying to get all this red stain out. It's all these nooks and crannies and contoured surfaces, and I really tried my best. And also I had an issue of there were different wood types, and I just knew that it was going to be even more hours to try to get all this out and to get it looking good to where the stain would take evenly. And then I would have to get into toning. And as much as it pained me, I decided to switch to painting the base. So I'm still going to stain the top, but I switched to painting the base. I know there are probably going to be some people who are pretty upset about it if they watch this, and sometimes you just kind of got to make a business decision and go with it. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. So I do hope that you'll stick around to see how it turned out. And also I have to do some problem solving here with just bleed through issues that I come across. And here you can see I have it prepped. The top is covered with paper and tape, and then I've, in my hardware that's off, I've put some long screws through so I can open and close the drawers as needed. But I'm going to spray with the drawers in, just since they're inset, that's easier, and then you can come along with a brush to touch up on the edges. I'm using a gray stain blocking primer from Melange Paints. It works really well. You can also see here I could not find my respirator, so I'm trying to cover my mouth as much as I can. But it works really well at covering up that red. And, I told you that I'm going to have some trouble with bleed through, but it's not on like the main surfaces. It's going to be the trim. And I think it's just where there's some open spots in the wood that bleed through happens. So, as a whole, I think it works really great. It's a water-based primer. It does block the stains well, but I'm going to have to pivot to another kind to get those spots that were giving me trouble. After priming, I'm going through and just smoothing it down. This sanding sponge, I really like it because you can get flat surfaces, then you can get any kind of contoured surface, but it's a 180 grit. I find that it's actually probably a little smoother than that, but I'm just going over and knocking down any bumps, and then I'll wipe off the sanding dust and get to my next coat. Along these lines here, I'm going to caulk because as I paint more, I feel like it's just going to have a lot more of those like little gloppy spots along the way, and I just don't like the way that looks. I think it looks a lot more professional, a lot more clean if you don't have that. So I'm just going to go ahead and caulk on the dresser and the chest of drawers on all those spots. For my paint color, I'm going with Turtle Dove Taupe by Melange Paints. It's a really pretty warm neutral. And you may be thinking to yourself, why did you paint with a gray primer when you're going with a light color? But honestly, that just came down to me being a little lazy, and that was the primer I had on hand, and I didn't want to go to the store and buy some. But I figured, I'm going to have to put at least a couple coats of paint on here anyways, so it's not really going to matter, and this is a great primer anyways. For my passes, I am overlapping by 50 to 75% on each time, and that gives you good coverage and also allows for the paint to have plenty of open time to dry and dry evenly. So it's next morning. I'm out here. I'm going to sand everything down. Like with just a light sand, I have it's a super fine 400 to 600 grit little foam sanding pad that I'm going to use. It's from Circ Prep. It's nice for just hand sanding like this too. But I did find a few spots that I'm going to use the glazing putty on and fix that and then sand it down. But thankfully it dries pretty fast, so I'll be able to sand and do some other things while I'm waiting for that to dry. But I'm gonna get going. Since it's a lighter color, I ended up doing 2 more coats of paint to get full coverage. Originally, I tried out a tan wash and then a light stain combo that I just didn't like with this color of paint. I felt like there needed to be more contrast. So I am sanding all that off and back, and I'm going to go with a darker stain. Here I am cleaning back all that sanding dust so it is a good surface for the stain. Unfortunately, when I applied it, it just totally gummed up on me. It was very hot on that day, and I just couldn't work fast enough to get it to look good. So it was super streaky, and I decided to pivot from an oil-based stain to use a water-based stain. All right, so let's hope that third time's a charm. So I've sanded everything back, and I am going to use a water-based stain this time. I decided to switch it up because I was having so much issues with the gel stain with the heat. This is water-based, so I'm going to use a spray bottle kind of as a slip coat as I go to help it stay drier. Stay damper. And I've got this edger that I'm using. It's a paint edger, but it's really great for dipping and spreading. So I'm going to get going with that. Oh, and it's Special Walnut by Minwax is the stain that I'm using.
Mommy, it's not working.
All right, Mama's recording right now. Can you?
It's not even working.
As you can see, I'm wiping it back pretty much immediately. I'm using some lint-free cloths. They just come in a big bag that I bought at Lowe's, and they work well at, wiping it back. And so I will just be going over it until I do not see any streaks. That's something you have to be mindful of, is that if you leave any of the excess stain on there, it will dry and leave a streak that does not look very good. So here it is, basically dry. It looks so much better. My one issue I have though is that there are these light spots. I'm concerned that's from that paint wash that I originally did, but I'm gonna go over it with one more coat of stain and hopefully that works itself out. And I went ahead and redid this one as well. Got some fly friends, but it's looking good. I will need to color correct on the front here on both pieces, but the sides are good. That's a little bit better light right there. So thankfully I don't have to fix that. Thankfully I had a toner on hand already that matched the stain pretty well, so I decided to try that out. Toner is a little tricky. You have to be pretty careful with it that it doesn't end up splotchy, but this one turned out well. And here I'm just going over it with shellac, and that helps seal in the color before I'm going to put any top coat on it. In the meanwhile, I am working on cleaning up the hardware. I let it simmer in a mixture of vinegar and water. It's a half and half mixture That simmered for about 15 minutes, and that just helps get all the years of gunk off of there. And then I'm coming in with Barkeeper's Friend and a quadruple zero steel wool pad and scrubbing it clean. And this method works so well. It really helps the hardware shine and look new again. You know, I will later add some rub and buff to it to just help even out the coloring and tone, because not every piece cleaned up as well as some did. So I wanted it to look a bit more uniform, but this one gives you an idea of one that cleaned up really nicely. So now it's time for top coat. So getting really close to the finish line, or so I thought. So I am wiping everything down really well, sanding around the area because I don't want any dust that's come into the garage to fly up while I'm spraying. Just like with the paint, I'm making passes that overlap by about 50%. This one I have sped up to 2 times the speed, but still with a top coat, I'm going over it much faster. It's thinner and it gets better coverage, and you also have to fight drips sometimes. So if you're spraying too much on there, then you're gonna have to do a lot of sanding and fixing. Okay, here is how it looks after one coat of top coat. You can see there, if you look at it with the sun shining at the angle, that there is a little streaky, but it'll be fine once I do my light sand and get my 2 more coats on here. So that will clear up, no big deal. While I'm waiting for the top coat to fully dry before I can lightly sand and recoat, I am just going over the edges of the drawer fronts to paint those areas. So one issue I've had is at some of these seams. It's a little bit hard to tell on camera, but there's bleed through of the tannins. I guess the primer didn't quite, cover these spots, and so the tannins from the wood are wanting to bleed through. So I am going through and adding more paint. I'm hoping, since this has built-in primer, that it's going to help seal it in with future top coats, but we'll see. All right, so I have scuff sanded everything down. My goodness, there's an ant. And wiped it down with tack cloth. I don't prefer tack cloths, but for this last top coat, I really want every little bit to be off, and it's just been hard to see it sometimes in the light. If there's little bits, and especially in the top where it's dark, I just don't want anything on there. So I'm gonna hopefully put this last coat of top coat on, hopefully not have any bleed through, and we can start finishing up, because this is taking forever. So remember that time that I told you need to be careful when you apply top coat that you don't put too much on there, or else you'll get drips? Well, that's what happened to me this time, unfortunately. The top was fine, but on the body there were several spots that I just sprayed too much, and unfortunately I had to fix it. I don't know if the camera is picking it up. It doesn't seem to, but I'm still having some spots where there is bleed through along these trim areas, and so unfortunately I think I'm gonna have to prime with a new stain blocking primer that I have, and there's even a spot right there, and repaint. I am very disappointed about it, but it is what it is. Thankfully, I have saved the paper from earlier. My thriftiness is paid off, so I'll just be reusing that and covering the top so I can fix all this. Now, I waited an entire day for the top coat to dry before I put any tape on there. I wanted to make sure that, it was good and at least partially cured, so there wouldn't be any issues. Unfortunately, there ends up being a small issue that I have to deal with, but you'll see that later. All right, everything is finally prepped to protect the tops, and I'm going to go through and stain all those joints as areas of trim, and the joints that are creating all the bleed through. It's not anywhere else. It's like not on the body of the dresser at all. It's just those areas. So, you know, this has been a lot of extra work. I'm obviously really frustrated, but at least this is lessons I've learned for future projects. I have 3 other mahogany dressers that are really similar to this style, so I will know that, you know, that's a high likelihood area of bleed through. But I'm ready to get this going. Hopefully this will be the last step and I will finally be on the set because I'm ready for it to be done. So I shared on my Instagram page that I was having these issues, and one of my good friends on there, Tatiana, her handle is Timeless by Tatiana, if you want to check her out. She shared with me that she had seen that Sherwin-Williams has a stain blocking primer in a spray can that is supposed to be really good for this certain issue with the bleed through. So I ran to my Sherwin-Williams and got it, and I loved it. It sprayed really well and it sanded down really easily. Like, there really wasn't a whole lot of sanding that I had to do. So I was really grateful that it worked so well, and I did apply 2 coats of it just to be really safe. And here you can see me reapplying my paint, and I had to, you know, paint the entire body again, and I had to do 2 coats there as well. And one little trick that I did with putting that paint on, because you remember that I had put top coat on top of my paint previously, but I just mixed about 1/4 of the paint with 3/4 of top coat, and that gives it enough coverage where there's paint on there, but then there's the hardness of the top coat. So I just did that rather than doing a couple coats of paint and then a couple coats of top coat, just to save some time, and I find that it works just as well. You'd think I'd finally be done, right? Well, unfortunately, when I peeled back the paint, there were these 2 little spots where the top coat chipped off. I think it was where I did some color correction and didn't seal it with the shellac like I should have. So I had to apply 2 more top coats. And while I'm waiting for that to dry, you know, I always finish off my drawers with Howard's Feed and Wax. And I also invested recently in this palm brush from Wise Owl, and oh my goodness, it saves so much time. I loved it, and it really applied the wax quickly and evenly, and so I'm glad I made that investment. All right, can you believe that is it? This was a project and a half. I learned a lot of lessons, and remember how damaged this top was? Like, it was pretty bad. There had been how many cups left on there without protection, but I was able to save it, and I'm so grateful that I could. Remember, there was a missing drawer glide as well. So without further ado, here are the finished dressers. What do you think? I really love how the colors all contrast off of each other. You have the neutral on the bottom, and then the beautiful gold of the hardware, and then that dark top. Look at the wood grain. I love it. It's just such a beautiful top, and I'm so glad that I was able to save it. You would never know that all that damage was there originally. So as a whole, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I would have loved to have restained it, but like I said, I'm really happy with how it turned out. And thank you for watching if you made it this far. And if you're not already subscribed, I'd love for you to follow along because I'll have lots more furniture flips coming your way. And I'll see you next time.